Hey everyone, how's it going? Forrest here, again with another installment of my complete analysis of all of J.S. Bach's chorale harmonizations. Today we are looking at Wie schön leuchtet der Morgenstern, which translates to how beautifully the morning star shines. Kind of some interesting stuff going on here in the hotspot. All in all, fairly straightforward chorale, has a unique harmonic profile. In the beginning, that's pretty neat, but from an analytical standpoint, it's fairly straightforward. So I think we're just going to hop right into the analysis. We have 4 sharps in the key signature. We start on E major and we end on E major, so I reckon we're in the key of E major here. We move to D sharp, F sharp, B, and B, which is our 5-chord in first inversion, B major over D sharp. And then we get E major again, E, E, B, and G sharp, tonic triad, root position. I think this is our gateway to the key of B major, though. Something that you're going to notice about the first 2 phrases is that the resolution to E major after the dominant is going to elide with the move to the key of B major. So E is just turning into 4 here. We then have a passing tone here in the tenor before we get C sharp, G sharp, C sharp, and E. I suppose you could analyze this like 2 in root position, but I think this G is an accented non-chord tone. It's really this A sharp that's our root, which would make this A sharp diminished over C sharp. 4 going to 7 is a much more normative progression. I think that that's what's being implied here. And then we have G sharp, B, D, and B, which is a deceptive progression. We typically would expect B major here, but we're getting G sharp minor, which in the upper voices looks like what we're going to get. Sorry, got a bit tongue-tied there, but instead of F sharp we have G sharp here on the bass, and then we get C sharp minor 7 over E, E, B, G sharp, and C sharp. We know that Bach loves 2-6-5 chords, especially in cadential situations. We would expect that to go to 5, F sharp, A sharp, F sharp, and C sharp, which it does. Then we get a perfect authentic cadence in the key of B with our tonic triad, B, D sharp, F sharp, and B. Next phrase also ends with a perfect authentic cadence in the key of B major, but that happens after we move to the key of E major for a little bit. B major is now our 5-chord, in my opinion. You could analyze really any of these chords here as common chords. Actually, either of these 2 chords could be points in which you would modulate between the 2 keys. But it feels like E major happens here. This feels like a 5-to-1 progression, at least the way that I hear it. But afterwards we get E major, E, E, G sharp, and B, tonic triad, and then we get A, E, A, and C sharp, which is our 4-chord A major in root position. We have an accented non-chord tone here where we have F sharp, A, and D sharp, which is another 7/6 chord here, similar to the progression we had in the previous phrase. However, we get the resolution here to E major that then turns into our 4-chord that will take us to the key of B major, just like we had here. G sharp, B, G sharp, and E. So that's our tonic triad in first inversion, which also happens to be 4/6 in the key of B major. And something to notice about 4/6 chords, we're going to see this progression quite a bit in this chorale. And I talked about it at length in previous videos, actually older videos. We haven't seen this progression quite some time. But when we have a 4-chord going to a 1-chord in first inversion, the 4-chord that is, every single time, except for one time that I've seen in Bach's chorales where this progression comes up, we see a leading tone connecting the bass of the 2 chords. So 6, 7, 1 will pretty much always be in the bass, except for one time where I saw that there wasn't a connecting leading tone here. So we get B, B, F sharp, and D sharp, tonic triad, root position. We then get F sharp, B, F sharp, and C sharp. I think this B is a 4/3 suspension over the bass. 4/3 suspensions are really common over 5 chords in Bach, especially in root position. Actually, really only in root position. 7/6 suspensions are much more common over inverted 5 chords. We have a neighbor tone here in the alto. Then we get the resolution here. All that really changes is the A sharp here. The bass leaps down, passing 7th of the alto, and then we cadence on B major, our tonic triad. B, B, D sharp, and B. 3 roots and 1/3 spelling. Last phrase we get a perfect authentic cadence in the key of E major, and we move to the key of E major in the same way that we did at the beginning, at the beginning of the previous phrase, where the B turns into the dominant of the key of E, and we get the resolution on the downbeat, the pickup, E, B, E, and G sharp. And then we get A, E, and C sharp, which is our 4 chord, A major, passing 7th in the tenor as well, before we get B, F sharp, D, and B. It's our 5 chord, B major, root position. Then we get C sharp, E, and A, which is a 4 chord in first inversion. Then we get some passing tones in the lower voice. We get a passing tone in the bass and a passing tone in the alto, and just like I said in the previous phrase, where we get this 4-6 to 1 progression where we have the leading tone in the bass, we have the same thing going on here with C sharp, D sharp, and E. The leading tone will always connect bare minimum. And sometimes we get a fully voiced chord. And actually in this case we do get a fully voiced chord. I misread the bass clef here. This is D sharp. So D sharp, F sharp, A, and C sharp is D sharp minor 7 flat 5, which is 7-7. 4 going to 7 is a very common subdivided chord progression in Bach's chorale writing. We would expect that to resolve to 1, E, B, G sharp, and G sharp, which is in fact a 1 chord. And E is a chord tone, so we don't have to mark it. We then get B, E, and F sharp. E is a 4-3 suspension over the bass. We get the resolution on the next beat. Little delayed passing 7th in the tenor here, and then we cadence on E major, E, G sharp, B, and E, tonic triad, root position. Okay, next phrase is very short. It's only 4 beats long, and it only consists of 2 chords. It ends in an imperfect authentic cadence. Really, the phrase is the cadence. We have D sharp, B, F sharp, and B here, which is our 5 chord first inversion, B major over D sharp. And then we have E, B, E, and G sharp, which is our tonic triad and root position. Next phrase follows suit in terms of the rhythmic duration and the melody as well, but it is a deceptive cadence where we move from 5 to 6. We have B, D sharp, F sharp, and B, which is our 5 chord and root position this time, and that takes us to C sharp minor, C sharp, E, and G sharp, which is our 6 chord, like I just said. Next phrase ends in a perfect authentic cadence in the key of E, and it's a relatively long phrase in proportion to the length of the phrases heard earlier in the chorale. We start off with a 2 chord, F sharp, C sharp, F sharp, and A, which is F sharp minor. We then get kind of an interesting progression. We have G sharp, B, E, and G sharp, which is our tonic triad in first inversion. Typically speaking, we would expect 2 to 1 progressions are, they're kind of rare in Bach's chorale writing. They're almost unheard of in situations where you have one beat of the harmonic rhythm going to the next beat of the harmonic rhythm. If you are talking about 2 to 1 chord progressions, they're much more common in subdivided situations where you see them happening over the span of 1 beat. But here's a 2 to 1 progression. I'd say the only thing that sort of makes this progression maybe more understandable, more normative, is the fact that the 1 chord is in first inversion. Root position 2 chords to root position 1 chords are exceptionally rare in Bach's chorale writing. Typically, as far as like plagal progressions are concerned, that is like a stable chord to the tonic. It's much more common to see 4 go to 1, but here we see 2 going to 1 in first inversion. But afterwards we get A, B, D sharp, and F sharp, which is our 5 chord in third inversion. We would expect that to go to our tonic triad in first inversion, and we get one of these resolutions that looks like an irregular 4-2 resolution, but really what's happening is the resolutions criteria are happening in 2 phases. So the bass does resolve down by step, and then the rest of the voices fully contextualize the chord. So literally speaking, this F sharp is an accented non-chord tone, and this is actually E major in root position, E, B, E, and G sharp. So it looks like 5-4-2 is going to a root position tonic triad, but this G sharp here really is satisfying the first of the 2 expected criteria we tend to see with 4-2 chords resolving, which is the roots are a fifth apart downwards, so 5 going to 1, and the bass resolves down by step. They're not happening at the same point metrically, but they are both happening, so it's not really an irregular resolution, but it looks like it on the page. Next beat, we get our dominant and first inversion. We have D sharp, B, F sharp, and A, which is 5-6-5, B7 over D sharp. And then we get our tonic triad, E, B, E, and G sharp. It's in root position. We then get B, B, D sharp, and F sharp, which is our 5 chord, B major again. B is a chord tone, so we don't have to mark it. And then this A is an accented non-chord tone here. We actually get G, B, E, and G sharp, B, E, and G sharp, which is our tonic triad and first inversion. And now we're sort of closing in on our cadence. We have F sharp, D sharp, F sharp, and A. I think this C sharp's an accented non-chord tone. This is really a 7-6 chord, but you could analyze it as a 2 chord as well. 6 of one, half dozen of another. You could even say this is a 2 to 7 chord progression. Just my general rule of thumb is that one voice moving doesn't really constitute a chord progression because the chords are already so similar at that point. But regardless, it really is semantics and doesn't really make too much of a difference in terms of the overall harmonic progression. But afterwards we get C sharp, E, E, and G sharp. C sharp minor in root position, that's a 6 chord. We saw 7-6 go to 6 earlier in the chorale as well, which is kind of interesting. But it was in the key of B major, not in the key of E major. We have passing tones in the bass and the alto here, which leaves us with B, E, D, and G sharp. Kind of a passing tonic 7 chord here in second inversion. I don't think it makes too much of an impact on the harmony in this case. I feel like those are just passing tones that incidentally create a chord, but maybe there is a tonic 7 chord going on, who knows. I think the bigger picture is that on the next beat we get A, E, C sharp, and F sharp, which is F sharp minor 7 over A. We know that Bach loves 2-6-5 chords, especially in cadential contexts. C sharp is a chord tone. D sharp is a non-chord tone, E is a chord tone. We would expect this to go to 5, which it does. B, B, D sharp, and F sharp, B major, passing 7th on the tenor, and then we cadence on E major like we would expect. E, G sharp, B, and E. And now for the probably most interesting part of the chorale, this modulation right here. So we end in the key of E major, but Bach moves to a very unusual key. All things considered, it's probably not a key that gets a ton of usage in the music that was written in and around his lifetime, and that is G sharp minor. So we have C sharp minor here to start off the phrase, C sharp, G sharp, and E, which is, like I said, C sharp minor. That's our 6 chord in the key of E minor, and it is our 4 chord in the key of G sharp minor, and we start to see these double accidentals here, which is pretty interesting. Little passing 7th in the tenor, and then we get D sharp, A sharp, F double sharp, and D sharp, which is our 5 chord in root position, D sharp major. That takes us to another one of these 4-6-1 chord progressions with the leading tone connecting the 6 and the 1 of the scale. Here in the bass we have E sharp, G sharp, G sharp, and C sharp, which is a byproduct of the melodic minor scale, right? If you took G sharp minor, it would be E sharp, F double sharp, G sharp. We can see it here in the bass, 4-6. Sometimes there's a 5-6 chord here or a 7 chord going on, but here we just have the bare minimum, which is a leading tone connecting the bass notes. And then we get our tonic triad, G sharp minor, G sharp, D sharp, G sharp, and B, which is, like I said, our tonic triad, which turns into our 3 chord in the key of E major. We also have a passing 7th here in the alto before we move to C sharp, E, and A. It's A major over C sharp, another 4-6-1 progression with this leading tone connecting the 6 and the 1 on the bass. We have E, B, E, and G sharp, tonic triad. And as we get ready for our cadence, we get a substitute for 2-6-5. We get 5-6-5 of 5, A sharp, C sharp, E, and F sharp. you can get this chord by raising the bass by a half step of a 2-6-5 chord, and it just turns into the dominant of the dominant. There's no modulation happening here, it's just a substitute, a secondary dominant. We would expect this to resolve to 5, which it does. B, B, D sharp, and F sharp, passing 7th in the tenor, and then we cadence on E major, E, G sharp, B, and E. Root position like we would expect the E chorale to end with. And that is today's analysis. I think the big takeaways for me are the 2-to-1 progression that we have going on here near the beginning of the second system. We also have this, where is it? The 5-4 2-to-1 resolution. It's not a massive takeaway, but it is something to take note of, the fact that the 4-2 chord doesn't always resolve on the harmonic rhythm the way that you would expect. Sometimes you need additional context to clarify what's going on. And also the fact that we go to G sharp minor, that's pretty rare. Can't think of any other times in Bach's chorales that he modulated to the key of G sharp minor. Maybe once, but that would have been a really long time ago for me, having looked at that chorale. So I'd have to go back through my notes to see whether or not we've seen G sharp minor. But definitely a rare key regardless. But that's today's analysis, so I think I'm going to cap the video off on those thoughts. If you're interested in following me along on the journey to analyze all of Bach's chorale harmonizations, feel free to subscribe to the channel. You can hit the notification icon and like the video if you enjoyed the content as well. Thank you so much for watching the video and supporting the channel by doing so. I look forward to tomorrow's analysis, and I hope you take care.